The notification pinged on my phone, a mundane email alert, the kind I usually ignored during my lunch break. But this one, dated July 17, 2023, had a subject line that made the lukewarm coffee in my hand tremble regarding 127 Willow Creek Drive. That was my property, the old family home I'd inherited from my parents, a place filled more with dust and memories than current life. I hadn't lived there in years, not since Claire and I had bought our place on Maple Avenue after we married. The email was from a Mrs. Henderson, the elderly lady who lived next door to Willow Creek, a woman whose Christmas cards were as regular as the changing seasons. She was worried, she wrote, about new tenants and late-night disturbances. New tenants? I hadn't authorized any tenants. A cold dread, sharp and unexpected, pierced through the comfortable routine of my Tuesday afternoon. I called Mrs. Henderson immediately. Her quavering voice confirmed my burgeoning fear. She described a woman matching Claire's description and a younger man, unfamiliar, moving furniture into the house just 2 days prior, on Sunday, July 15th. She'd assumed I'd rented it out, but something felt off to her. My heart hammered against my ribs. Claire had left me. Just like that. 1 week ago, on July 10th, after 22 years of what I believed to be a stable, if perhaps unexciting, marriage, she had announced she needed space, that she was unhappy and was moving out to find herself. She'd packed a few bags and gone to her sister's, or so she'd claimed. There had been no mention of anyone else, no hint of such a monumental betrayal. And now this. She hadn't just left me for a younger man, she had, with an audacity that stole my breath, moved him into a house that was unequivocally mine, a house that held the echoes of my childhood, a sanctuary she was now defiling. The casual cruelty of it was a separate, deeper wound. I thanked Mrs. Henderson, my voice a hollow echo of its usual calm, promising to look into it. The rest of that day is a blur. The sandwich on my desk remained uneaten, the afternoon's meetings a distant hum. The only clear thought was the image of Claire, my Claire, setting up a new life with another man, a younger man, in the shadowed rooms of my parents' home. The betrayal wasn't just infidelity, it was a violation of memory, of trust, of the very foundations of the life I thought we had built. She hadn't just broken my heart, she trespassed on my history.my relationship with Claire, looking back, was a study in quiet devotion, or so I'd always perceived it. We met in the autumn of 1999. I was 32 then, a junior architect beginning to make a name for myself at a small but respected firm, Thompson & Associates. Claire was 28, a vibrant, intelligent woman working as a paralegal with a quick laugh and an opinion on everything. We were introduced by mutual friends, a cliché perhaps, but our connection felt anything but. Our courtship was steady, not a whirlwind romance, but a gentle unfolding of shared interests and mutual respect. We married on a crisp October day in 2001, a simple ceremony followed by a reception with close friends and family. I remember the feel of her hand in mine, the certainty in her eyes matching my own. I was utterly committed. My career was demanding, long hours were often the norm, but I made it a point to be present. I coached our son, Michael's, little league team for 3 seasons, even though it meant rearranging client meetings. I learned to cook her favorite Italian dishes, struggling through complex recipes just to see her smile. When her mother fell ill in 2010, I was the one who drove her to the hospital every other day for 6 months, sat with her through anxious nights, and managed the insurance paperwork that Claire found too overwhelming. I never saw these as sacrifices, merely the actions of a devoted husband. Financially, I was always the more stable earner. Claire's career had its ups and downs. She switched jobs a few times, even took a couple of years off when Michael was young. I encouraged her pursuits, supported her decisions, wanting her to find fulfillment. Our home on Maple Avenue was purchased primarily with my savings and a modest inheritance I'd received before we were married, though her name was on the deed alongside mine, a testament to my belief in our partnership. The Willow Creek house, however, was different. It was bequeathed solely to me upon my father's passing in 2015. It was older, needed work, and held too many poignant memories for me to consider selling it immediately. Claire had never shown much interest in it, occasionally referring to it as your father's dusty old place. We discussed its future a few times. I'd considered renovating it as a long-term investment or perhaps a weekend getaway once Michael was older and out of the house. It was always my house in our conversations, my responsibility, my decision. There was never any ambiguity about its ownership, legally or emotionally. It was registered in my name alone, a fact documented in my father's will and subsequent probate records, copies of which were securely filed in my home office. I prided myself on my loyalty, my steadfastness. I believed in the vows we took, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health. I thought we were a team, weathering life's inevitable storms together. The idea that she could harbor such discontent, such a capacity for deceit while I remained oblivious, was a blow to my perception of myself as an observant, caring partner. The stability I had so carefully cultivated, the life I thought was built on a bedrock of mutual trust, had apparently been, for her, a gilded cage from which she plotted an escape. The signs, in retrospect, were there, subtle as whispers but insidious in their accumulation. It began, I think, around the spring of 2022, a little over a year before she left. Claire had always been active, enjoying her yoga classes and weekend hikes, but she suddenly threw herself into a new fitness regime with an almost religious fervor. She joined a trendy new gym downtown, Pulse Fitness, and started spending several evenings a week there, often coming home late, flushed and energized, but also more distant. She'd talk about her new gym buddies, a younger crowd, and how invigorating it was. I was pleased she'd found a new passion, or so I told myself, dismissing the slight pang of exclusion I felt. Then came the changes in her appearance. New, more youthful clothes, a different hairstyle, more attention to her makeup even on casual days. "Just feeling good about myself, David," she'd say with a breezy confidence I hadn't seen in years. I complimented her, genuinely happy to see her spirits lifted, yet a small, nagging voice wondered who this transformation was truly for. Her phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter or the bedside table, became her constant companion, always angled away from me, often silenced or flipped screen down. Texts would come in at odd hours, and she'd offer vague explanations. "Oh, just Sarah from yoga," or "work stuff." There was an increase in girls' nights out and weekend workshops or retreats with colleagues I'd never met. When Michael, then 20 and home from college for the summer, innocently asked about one of these new colleagues, Claire had been uncharacteristically evasive. I remember a particular instance in early 2023, around March. We were supposed to attend a dinner party at our friends the Clarksons. An hour before we were due to leave, Claire received a text. She read it, her expression unreadable for a moment, then announced she had a splitting headache and couldn't possibly go. She urged me to go alone, which I did, feeling a mixture of concern and a strange, undefined suspicion. Later that week, I saw a charge on our joint credit card statement from a restaurant I didn't recognize, Luca's Trattoria, dated the night of the Clarksons' dinner. When I casually asked her about it, she brushed it off, saying she'd grabbed a solo dinner there another night because she was working late. It was plausible, yet it didn't sit right. I tried to talk to her, to bridge the growing emotional chasm. "Is everything okay, Claire?" I'd ask. "You seem a bit distant lately." She would invariably reassure me, blaming stress at her new marketing job, or simply needing more me time. She became adept at turning my concerns back on me, suggesting I was being overly sensitive or even a little paranoid. "Not everything is about you, David," she once snapped, a harshness in her tone that stung. I started sleeping poorly. My mind would race, replaying conversations, searching for clues I might have missed. I even, shamefully, considered checking her phone, but couldn't bring myself to breach that boundary. I told myself I was overthinking, that marriages go through phases, that this too would pass. I clung to the image of the Claire I knew, the woman I had loved and trusted for over 2 decades, unable, or perhaps unwilling, to see the stranger she was becoming. The stability I cherished was slowly eroding, and I, in my well-meaning but ultimately naive way, was standing by, watching the tide go out, believing it would naturally turn. The week Claire left, the week beginning Monday, July 8, 2023, had been deceptively normal. We had dinner together a few nights, discussed Michael's upcoming visit, even talked about potentially planning a short vacation for the fall. Then, on Wednesday, July 10th, she dropped the bomb. She sat me down in the living room, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the carpet, and told me she was leaving. Her words were rehearsed, devoid of deep emotion, like she was reciting lines from a play. "I'm not happy, David. I haven't been for a long time. I need to find myself, figure out who I am without this." She gestured vaguely around the room, encompassing our life, our home, me. She said she'd be staying with her sister, Carol, until she found her own place. There were no tears, no apologies, just a chillingly calm resolve. The mention of another man was conspicuously absent. I was stunned, blindsided. I asked questions, pleaded for explanations, for a chance to fix whatever was broken. Was it me? Had I done something? She just shook her head, repeating that it wasn't about me, it was about her. The next day, she packed 2 suitcases and left in a taxi. I didn't hear from her directly for the next few days, just a brief text saying she'd arrived safely at Carol's. The shock slowly gave way to a profound sense of grief and confusion. Then came Mrs. Henderson's email on July 17th. The revelation that Claire had moved into the Willow Creek house, my house, with a younger man, whom Mrs. Henderson later described as tall, dark-haired, probably in his early 30s, and driving a sporty red coupe, was a visceral gut punch. The calculated nature of it was what truly horrified me. She hadn't just found solace in another's arms. She had orchestrated a clandestine move into my property, a place I cherished, with her new partner. My first instinct, a hot wave of anger and betrayal, urged me to drive straight to Willow Creek, to confront them, to demand answers. But a deeper, colder part of my mind took over. This wasn't a situation for emotional outbursts. This required a strategy. I was an architect. I understood structure, planning, and the importance of solid foundations. My marriage had crumbled, but my response to this wouldn't. That evening, after a sleepless night, I began to prepare. I pulled out the thick folder labeled Willow Creek Property. Inside were the deed, property tax statements, my father's will, insurance documents, everything establishing my sole, undisputed ownership. I scanned each document, saving them to a secure cloud drive and a separate USB stick. I took photographs of the current state of my finances, our joint accounts, which I noted she hadn't touched beyond her usual monthly spending, interestingly, and my own separate accounts. I then contacted my lawyer, Arthur Jennings, a man who had handled my father's estate and whom I trusted implicitly. I laid out the situation to him in a calm, measured email on July 18th, CCing my private email address, not the shared one Claire technically still had access to, though rarely used. Subject: Urgent property and marital issue, David Bishop. I detailed Claire's departure, the subsequent discovery of her occupying 127 Willow Creek Drive with an unknown male, and my clear legal ownership of the property. I attached copies of the deed and my father's will. Arthur called me within the hour. His advice was clear: do not engage with them directly yet. ascertain the identity of the man if possible, without confrontation, and then we would proceed with a formal eviction. He also advised me to begin separating our finances more formally and to gather all documentation related to our shared assets, particularly our Maple Avenue home. The next step was information. On July 19th, a Friday, I drove to Willow Creek Drive. I parked down the street, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. I saw the red coupe Mrs. Henderson had mentioned parked in the driveway. After about an hour of observation, I saw him, Ben, as I would later learn his name was, emerge from the house. He was exactly as described, young, confident, carrying himself with an air of entitled ownership as he watered the potted plants on the porch. Plants Claire must have brought. The sight of him, so casually making himself at home in my parents' house, with my estranged wife, ignited a cold fury within me. I took several discreet photographs with my phone, capturing his face, his car, the license plate. I even managed to get a shot of him and Claire together when she briefly came to the doorway. That evening, a little online sleuthing, cross-referencing his car's license plate, which was registered to a Benjamin R. Keller, age 32, with Claire's recent social media activity, which she hadn't been very careful about scrubbing, painted a clearer picture. Ben Keller was a fitness entrepreneur and a senior instructor at Pulse Fitness, the very gym Claire had become obsessed with. Their digital footprints, once I knew what to look for, showed a connection going back at least 6 months. The pieces clicked into place, forming a grim tableau of deceit. My quiet preparation was underway. I had the legal standing, the evidence, and a clear path forward. There would be no shouting matches, no desperate pleas. There would only be the methodical application of the law and the quiet, inevitable reclaiming of what was mine. The next few weeks were a masterclass in emotional control and meticulous planning. Arthur Jennings proved to be an invaluable ally, his calm demeanor and sharp legal mind a perfect counterpoint to the emotional turmoil I was privately enduring. Our first official step, taken on Monday, July 22, 2023, was to issue a formal notice to quit to Claire Bishop and any other occupants at 127 Willow Creek Drive. Arthur explained that, despite my sole ownership because Claire had been my wife and had, however illicitly, established residency even if only for a few days, we needed to follow the correct legal eviction process to avoid any potential counterclaims of illegal eviction. The notice, delivered by a registered process server, gave them 30 days to vacate the premises. A copy was also mailed via certified post, return receipt requested. I imagined the scene, Claire, perhaps in the middle of brewing coffee for her new lover in my mother's old kitchen, being handed the stark, legal document. The thought brought a grim sort of satisfaction. Simultaneously, Arthur began preparing the divorce petition. Grounds: adultery and irreconcilable differences. We meticulously documented Claire's desertion and her cohabitation with Ben Keller at the Willow Creek property. The photographs I had taken, along with a sworn affidavit from Mrs. Henderson, who was more than willing to help, outraged by what she saw as a moral travesty, became key pieces of evidence. I also started the process of financially disentangling myself from Claire. I opened new bank accounts in my name only. I contacted our joint credit card companies, informed them of our separation, and requested my name be removed or the accounts frozen to prevent further shared debt. I had a detailed record of the account balances at the time of her departure. On July 25th, I sent Claire a carefully worded email from my personal account. It was brief and to the point. Claire, I am aware of your cohabitation with Benjamin Keller at 127 Willow Creek Drive. A formal notice to quit has been served. Additionally, I have initiated divorce proceedings. My lawyer, Arthur Jennings, will be in contact with you or any legal representation you secure. Please ensure any further communication regarding these matters is directed through him. David. I received no direct reply. However, a week later, on August 1st, Arthur received a call from a lawyer named Susan Albright identifying herself as Claire's counsel. The battle lines were drawn. Claire, through Ms. Albright, initially attempted to contest the eviction, claiming she had a right to be in the Willow Creek house due to our marriage. Arthur swiftly countered with the irrefutable proof of my sole ownership predating our marriage and the fact that it was never a marital home. He pointed out that her actions constituted a clear breach of trust and trespass. Their claim was weak, and I suspect Ms. Albright knew it. The more significant contention arose over the Maple Avenue house and spousal support. Claire, despite her actions, was now demanding half the equity in the Maple Avenue house and substantial monthly alimony, citing her lower earning potential and years dedicated to the family. This was where my detailed record-keeping and comms strategy paid dividends. We had a prenuptial agreement, something I had insisted upon gently given my established career and assets before our marriage. It wasn't ironclad regarding all assets acquired during the marriage, but it did clearly delineate separate property, which Willow Creek undoubtedly was. Regarding Maple Avenue, while it was a marital asset, we were prepared to argue that her flagrant infidelity and the manner of her departure should be considered in the division. More pointedly, her current cohabitation with Ben Keller significantly weakened her claim for spousal support under our state's laws. The exposure of their affair wasn't just about social embarrassment, it had direct legal ramifications. I didn't need to shout from the rooftops. The legal documents, the affidavits, the carefully gathered evidence spoke for themselves calmly and irrefutably in the sterile environment of lawyers' offices and, if necessary, a courtroom. The 30-day notice period for Willow Creek ticked by. I resisted the urge to drive past to check. I trusted the process. Mrs. Henderson, bless her, provided occasional, discreet updates. The red car is still there, she'd say, or they had a rather loud argument on the porch last night. On August 21, 2023, the day after the notice to quit expired, Arthur arranged for a sheriff's deputy to accompany me to Willow Creek if they hadn't vacated. That morning, however, Arthur called. "David," he said, "Susan Albright just contacted me. They're out. She says Ms. Bishop and Mr. Keller vacated the Willow Creek property late last night. They'll be providing a forwarding address for Ms. Bishop shortly." A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. The first part of the battle was won not with anger or aggression, but with the quiet, relentless pressure of the law. They had been exposed, their audacious land grab thwarted. The house, my parents' house, was mine again. Justice, in this instance, was the quiet click of a lock in an empty house, a lock I would soon change. The day I went back to Willow Creek, August 22, 2023, was overcast, the sky a muted gray. I had a locksmith scheduled for the afternoon. Arthur had advised it, and frankly, the thought of Claire or Ben Keller possessing a key to my property was intolerable. The house felt different, tainted. Walking through the familiar rooms, I could see faint traces of their brief, unwelcome occupancy. A slight, unfamiliar floral scent lingered in the air, a cheap air freshener perhaps. There were a few scuff marks on the hallway floorboards that hadn't been there before, likely from their hasty move-in and move-out. In the kitchen, I found a single, forgotten coffee mug on the counter, not one of ours, but a bright, garish thing with a motivational slogan, "Live your best life." The irony was not lost on me. They hadn't taken anything of significant value that belonged to the house itself, thankfully. My father's old armchair still sat in its usual corner, the antique grandfather clock in the hall stood silent but unharmed. But they had left behind a palpable sense of violation. I spent that afternoon with the windows wide open, letting the breeze clear out the stale energy. The locksmith arrived, a cheerful, no-nonsense man named Gary who efficiently replaced all the exterior door locks. Handing me the new set of keys felt like a tangible reclaiming of my space, my history. The divorce proceedings moved forward. Claire's demands for spousal support dwindled significantly once it became clear we could prove her cohabitation with Ben Keller from almost the moment she left me. Her lawyer, Ms. Albright, clearly advised her that her position was untenable. The adultery, while not a primary factor in the asset division in our no-fault state, certainly didn't help her image or her claims of needing support due to hardship she arguably brought upon herself. The Maple Avenue house was the main point of negotiation. It was a marital asset and she was entitled to a share. However, given the circumstances, Arthur argued for a division that was equitable but also reflected her actions. We presented evidence of her calculated deception, the emotional distress caused, and the fact that her new relationship was already established. In the end, we reached a settlement in late October 2023. Claire received a portion of the equity from Maple Avenue, but less than the 50% she had initially demanded. I agreed to buy out her share, allowing me to keep the home where Michael had grown up, which was important to me. She waived any claim to spousal support. The divorce was finalized on November 15, 2023. The decree, a simple document, signified the legal end of a 22-year partnership. There was no dramatic courtroom showdown. Most of it was handled through mediation and correspondence between Arthur and Ms. Albright. The exposure of Claire and Ben was largely confined to these legal processes and the necessary disclosures. I had no interest in a wider social shaming. Their own actions, I felt, would eventually speak for themselves within their own circles. I heard through the grapevine, the small town inevitably talked, that Claire and Ben had rented a small apartment across town. Their best life in my inherited home had been short-lived. The justice I found wasn't about revenge in the typical sense. It wasn't about making Claire suffer wantonly. It was about reasserting boundaries, protecting my assets, and ensuring that the end of our marriage was handled with a degree of fairness that she herself had failed to exhibit. It was about the quiet, methodical dismantling of her ill-conceived plan, executed not with raised voices or angry confrontations, but with the calm precision of legal strategy. The satisfaction came from seeing the system work, from knowing that my careful preparation had yielded the desired outcome, preserving my dignity and my property. The locks were changed, the legal ties were severed, and slowly the house on Willow Creek began to feel like mine again. The first winter after the divorce was quiet. The Maple Avenue house felt large and empty without Claire's presence, even though her presence in the last year had been more ghost than partner. Michael, home from university for the holidays, was a comforting buffer, his youthful energy filling the silence. He knew the broad strokes of what had happened. His mother had left, there was someone else, but I spared him the uglier details about Willow Creek. He was disappointed in her, confused, but he handled it with a maturity that made me proud. With the legal battles concluded, a profound sense of emotional closure began to settle in. It wasn't a sudden wave of happiness, but a gradual lessening of the ache, a slow return to a new kind of normal. The anger and betrayal, while not entirely gone, no longer consumed my waking thoughts. Instead, there was a quiet resolve, a sense of peace earned through a difficult ordeal. I started to reinvest in myself. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during the latter, strained years of my marriage. I threw myself into my work at Thompson and Associates with renewed focus, finding satisfaction in design and creation. I even took up a new hobby, woodworking. I cleared out a section of the garage at Willow Creek after a thorough deep clean of the entire house and set up a small workshop. There was something immensely therapeutic about taking raw timber and shaping it into something new, something useful, something beautiful. My first project was a simple bookshelf for Michael's apartment. The house on Willow Creek, once a symbol of betrayal, slowly began to transform in my mind. It was no longer tainted by Claire and Ben's brief, unwelcome stay. Instead, it became a project, a link to my parents, and a place for quiet contemplation. I decided against selling it. In the spring of 2024, I began minor renovations, a new coat of paint, refinished floors, a modernized kitchen. Nothing extravagant, just enough to refresh it, to make it truly mine again. I even started spending occasional weekends there, enjoying the peace of the old neighborhood, the familiar creaks of the house settling at night. I learned a great deal from the whole experience. I learned that stability can be an illusion if not built on genuine, reciprocal trust and open communication. I learned that I am more resilient than I ever thought possible. I learned the value of good legal counsel and the power of calm, methodical action over reactive anger. I also learned to pay closer attention to the subtle cues in relationships, not to take anything for granted, and to trust my instincts. There's a quiet strength in navigating betrayal with dignity and emerging whole, if somewhat scarred. My life now, in the spring of 2025, is different, certainly not what I envisioned a few years ago. But it's not a lesser life. It's a life rebuilt on a foundation of self-respect and a clearer understanding of what truly matters. I still believe in loyalty and commitment, but my eyes are wider now. The experience didn't make me bitter, strangely enough. It made me more discerning. As for Claire, I hear very little. Our paths don't cross. I harbor no lingering desire for further revenge or confrontation. The justice I achieved was sufficient. She made her choices, and she, presumably, is living with the consequences, just as I am living with mine. My final thoughts often drift to the simple act of changing those locks at Willow Creek. It was more than just a practical measure. It was a symbolic act of reclaiming not just a house, but my peace of mind, my future. And that, I've come to realize, is the most satisfying outcome of all.